was weird.
For nearly 14 years, Britney Spears fought to get one thing back: her freedom. Millions of fans rallied behind her. Celebrities spoke out. A grassroots movement grew into an international headline. And in November 2021, the conservatorship that had controlled much of her personal and financial life finally came to an end. It looked like the ending everyone had been waiting for. But just a few years later, something didn't make sense. Britney wasn't launching a world tour. She wasn't recording a comeback album. She wasn't rebuilding the career that millions believed had been taken from her. Instead, she seemed to be walking away from it. So here's the question that has quietly followed Britney Spears ever since. If she fought so hard to reclaim her life, why did she choose not to reclaim the career that made her one of the biggest stars on earth? And there's another mystery. Was the end of the conservatorship really the happy ending people imagined? Or was it simply the beginning of a completely different battle? To answer those questions, we have to separate the headlines from reality. Because the story most people think they know is only half the story. When Judge Brenda Penny officially ended Britney Spears' conservatorship on November 12, 2021, the moment felt historic. Outside the courthouse in Los Angeles, hundreds of supporters celebrated. For years, the #Free Britney movement had argued that Britney deserved the right to control her own life. The court's decision marked the legal end of an arrangement that had lasted nearly 14 years. For the first time in well over a decade, Britney could make major personal and financial decisions without a conservator's approval. To millions watching around the world, it looked like the final chapter. Freedom had finally arrived. But what many people didn't realize was that ending the conservatorship solved only one problem. It didn't erase everything that had happened during those 14 years. Imagine spending over a decade with some of the most important decisions in your life made under a legal framework you wanted to end. Even after that framework is gone, rebuilding your life doesn't happen overnight. And Britney seemed to understand that better than anyone. Almost immediately after gaining her freedom, she began making deeply personal decisions. In September 2021, she announced her engagement to actor and fitness trainer Sam Asghari. Then, in June 2022, the couple married in an intimate ceremony attended by several well-known celebrities. To many fans, the wedding symbolized something much bigger than a celebrity marriage. It represented choice. For years, Britney had publicly stated during court proceedings that she wanted the freedom to marry and to have another child. Now, she finally could. For a brief moment, it genuinely seemed like life was moving in the direction she'd hoped for. But only weeks before the wedding, Britney and Sam shared heartbreaking news. They announced that Britney had suffered a miscarriage early in the pregnancy. It was one of the first major personal challenges she faced after regaining her independence. The announcement reminded people of something that's easy to forget when talking about celebrities. Freedom doesn't protect anyone from loss. Life doesn't suddenly become perfect because a legal battle ends, and that realization raises another question. If Britney was finally free to build the life she'd wanted, why did the years that followed still seem so turbulent? Part of the answer may lie in something people rarely discuss. Most of us define freedom as the ability to choose what we want. But what if real freedom also means choosing what we don't want? That idea would soon become one of the biggest surprises in Britney Spears' entire story. Because while fans were waiting for the biggest comeback in pop music history, Britney was beginning to send signals that her priorities had changed. At first, those signals were easy to miss. In August 2022, she released Hold Me Closer, a collaboration with Elton John. The song reached the charts in multiple countries and reignited excitement among fans. For a moment, it looked exactly like the comeback everyone had predicted. The headlines almost wrote themselves. Britney is back. But appearances can be misleading. One successful collaboration didn't necessarily mean Britney wanted to return to the relentless cycle of recording albums, promoting singles, touring the world, and living under constant public scrutiny. In fact, the months that followed suggested something very different. And that's where this story... If you asked most people what happened after Britney Spears regained her freedom, you'd probably hear the same answer. She got married, released a book, got divorced, and disappeared from music. Technically, that's true, but it misses the most important part of the story, because those events weren't the story. They were the consequences of something much bigger. The real question wasn't what Britney did after the conservatorship ended. It was why she made those choices. And the answer starts with something millions of people never stopped expecting from her: a comeback. For nearly 2 decades, Britney Spears had been one of the biggest names in entertainment. She sold more than 100 million records worldwide. She headlined sold-out world tours. She dominated MTV. She inspired an entire generation of pop stars. So when the conservatorship ended, almost everyone assumed there was only one logical next step: another album, another tour, another era. Even entertainment reporters framed the conversation that way. The question wasn't if Britney would return, it was when. But while the public was planning her comeback, Britney appeared to be planning something else entirely. And there was an early sign that many people overlooked. In August 2022, she released Hold Me Closer, a collaboration with Elton John. The song performed well internationally and reminded everyone that Britney still had the ability to command global attention with almost no promotion. For fans, it felt like the beginning. For the music industry, it looked promising. But for Britney, it may have been something completely different. Because after that release, there wasn't another album announcement. There wasn't a world tour. There wasn't a major television interview promoting a new musical era. Instead, months passed. Then more months. Eventually, people started asking a different question. Why wasn't Britney coming back? Some believed she was secretly recording. Others claimed new music was just around the corner. Social media filled the silence with theories. But theories aren't facts, and Britney eventually addressed the speculation herself. In early 2024, reports suggested that several producers and songwriters were interested in working with her. The headlines fueled excitement across entertainment media, but Britney publicly pushed back. She said she wasn't returning to the music industry as a full-time recording artist and criticized reports suggesting otherwise. That statement surprised millions. Not because artists retire. Artists do that all the time. It was surprising because of everything people believed the #Free Britney movement had been fighting for. Many fans had imagined freedom leading straight back to the stage. Britney seemed to define freedom differently. For years, her career had been driven by schedules, contracts, deadlines, rehearsals, recordings, promotions, and relentless public attention. Now, for the first time in decades, she had the power to say no. And maybe that's the part many people misunderstood. Freedom isn't just the ability to choose what you want. It's also the ability to reject what everyone else expects from you. That shift changes the entire story. Suddenly, Britney wasn't trying to become the old Britney again. She was trying to discover who she wanted to be without the pressure of constantly performing. But there was another challenge waiting, one that had nothing to do with music. In October 2023, Britney released her memoir, The Woman in Me. It quickly became one of the year's biggest publishing successes, selling more than 1 million copies in its first week. For the first time, readers weren't hearing Britney's story through court documents, television panels, or tabloid headlines. They were hearing it from Britney herself. The memoir revisited her rise to fame, her relationships, her family life, and her experience under the conservatorship. Whether readers agreed with every perspective or not, one thing became undeniable. Britney had reclaimed ownership of her own narrative. That may sound simple, but for someone whose life had been interpreted by millions of strangers for over 20 years, it was a profound change. Instead of answering questions from interviewers, she chose to write the story herself, and that's when another realization begins to emerge. Maybe the greatest comeback Britney Spears ever wanted wasn't a musical comeback at all. Maybe it was a personal one. A chance to live without constantly proving herself to the world. But if that was true, why did public concern about Britney continue even after she regained her freedom? Why did every Instagram post become a headline? Why did every public appearance spark another wave of debate? And perhaps most importantly, had the conservatorship ended? Or had the public simply found a new way to watch Britney's life? That question would become one of the defining themes of everything that happened next. By 2024, nearly 3 years had passed since Britney Spears walked out of court as a free woman. Legally, the conservatorship was over. But emotionally, the conversation around Britney never really ended. Every time she posted a video on Instagram, it became news. Every vacation photo sparked debate. Every public appearance generated thousands of comments from people trying to answer the same question. Is Britney okay? On the surface, that might sound like genuine concern, and sometimes it probably was. But there was another side to it. For more than 25 years, the public had become accustomed to watching Britney Spears' life unfold in real time. From her teenage rise to fame, to her highly publicized relationships, to the conservatorship, millions of people had spent decades feeling connected to someone they had never actually met. When the conservatorship ended, many expected the scrutiny to end too. Instead, the spotlight simply changed direction. For years, people questioned whether Britney had enough control over her own life. Now they questioned every decision she made after gaining that control. In other words, Britney had won the right to make her own choices. But she hadn't escaped the world's opinion about those choices. And nowhere was that more obvious than in the conversation about music. Fans continued asking, when is the next album? When is the tour? When is the comeback? The expectation never disappeared. But Britney's own words painted a different picture. She explained publicly that she wasn't interested in returning to the music industry as a full-time recording artist. For some fans, that was disappointing. For others, it was the first real sign that Britney was finally making decisions for herself instead of living up to everyone else's expectations. And that's when the biggest question of this documentary finally has an answer. If Britney Spears fought so hard for her freedom, why didn't she return to the career that made her famous? Because the fight was never about getting her old life back. It was about getting her right to choose. For years, millions of people, including many fans, viewed freedom as a path back to the stage. Britney appeared to define freedom very differently. Freedom meant deciding whether she wanted to perform at all. Freedom meant writing a memoir instead of recording an album. Freedom meant choosing privacy over promotion. Freedom meant saying no without needing anyone else's permission. That doesn't mean her life suddenly became easy. Freedom doesn't erase grief. It doesn't repair family relationships overnight. It doesn't undo years of public scrutiny. And it certainly doesn't guarantee happiness. What it does provide is ownership. Ownership of your decisions. Ownership of your mistakes. Ownership of your future. There's another reason Britney's story continues to resonate far beyond the world of pop music. It forced Hollywood to confront difficult questions. How much control should the entertainment industry have over its biggest stars? Where is the line between protecting someone and controlling them? What responsibility does the media have when covering someone whose personal struggles become public entertainment? Those questions don't have simple answers. But Britney's story ensured they could no longer be ignored. And in many ways, that may become her most lasting legacy. Not just the records she sold, not the awards she won, not the concerts she performed, but the conversation she changed. Today, Britney Spears remains one of the most recognizable celebrities in the world. Her memoir is being adapted into a feature film, introducing her story to a new generation. Whether she ever records another album remains unknown. Whether she ever performs on stage again is something only she can decide. And maybe that's exactly how she wants it. Because after decades of being told who she should be, for the first time in a very long time, Britney Spears is the one writing the next chapter. Maybe not in a recording studio, maybe not on a world tour, but on her own terms. And perhaps that's the ending millions of people were hoping for all along, even if it wasn't the one they expected. So maybe the real story after Hash, Free Britney, was never about a comeback. Maybe it was about something far more difficult. Learning how to live as an ordinary person, after spending a lifetime being one of the most extraordinary celebrities on Earth. Only time will tell what Britney Spears chooses to do next. But this time, the choice is finally hers. If freedom means having the right to choose your own path, even when it disappoints everyone else's expectations, do you think Britney Spears made the right decision by stepping away from the music industry? Or do you believe there's still one final chapter left in her career?